Take a look back at Fallout 3 and New Vegas and bask in the uniqueness and lunacy of some of their weapons. That is a functioning Nuka-Cola sign that can electrocute people when you smack them with it. Then look at Fallout 4 and bask in the tedium of legendary weapons. In previous 3D Fallout games, when you found a new named weapon, you were probably excited to play with it, to test it on random enemies, or even find the biggest baddest foe in the region to see how it holds up in a real fight. Sometimes you'll even give it to a companion to see just what those monsters can do with such an upgrade. Boone's scary enough without a unique cowboy repeater or sniper rifle, but that's not stopping some of us from handing him one. And Hades forbid you give Charon a certain terrible shotgun. Don't actually do that unless you want him to steal your main character status. So, how does the legendary system ruin all of that fun? Well, to paraphrase a perfect villain, if everything's special, nothing is. There's a gun you can find pretty early on, especially on replays, called the Gainer. It's a nifty little magnum that sets targets on fire. And yet, other than being named, it's not special or unique. There isn't even a slightly different texture or some kind of fire engraving on it. It looks and acts just like an ordinary incendiary 44 Magnum. And yes, I did just call a legendary weapon ordinary. This gets worse when you realize Trudy's trading post is right behind Concord, and she sells a unique sword called General Chow's Revenge, that while being a bit pricey, you can still buy if you've been picking up everything you see, which we all know you have because we are all loot happy in these games, don't deny it. The sword has the effect of doing 50% more damage to robots. This is just the troubleshooter's legendary effect. You can easily find an identical sword that does the same thing without the unique name, or even firearms that do the same. There are a few, a precious few, truly unique weapons in Fallout 4, such as the World Series bat that has a chance to launch an enemy like a catapult, which is hilarious, and the Striker, which fires bowling balls of all things, and a small variety of other interesting or even oddball items. So it's not like Bethesda can't make interesting uniques. However, these truly unique weapons are by no means the majority. They are in fact the vast minority of legendary weapons, and are often overshadowed by the sheer number of legendary weapons you will wind up with. So what's the point of going out of your way for quote-unquote unique quest rewards or exploring to find them if a random legendary radroach can usually drop something identical? The first time Dance handed me the Righteous Authority, I thought, ooh, neat, this looks powerful. I wonder if it'll somehow grow stronger as I go through the Brotherhood quests. Only to realize a little later, it's a standard legendary effect on a bog-basic laser weapon. The Lucky effect, if you're curious. It didn't even have a slightly different look. No siree, not even a Brotherhood logo. Sadly, this is the case for not all, but a lot of named weapons or armor. They're just functionally identical copies of their non-named legendary counterparts. It does not take long, especially on higher difficulties, to realize basically every legendary drop is going to be, well, boring, samey BS. I know I'm quoting somebody there, but I'm really not sure who. And if there's one thing a legendary weapon shouldn't be, it's boring. Frankly, it greatly devalues the named variants. It is entirely possible to find a legendary Lucky laser rifle before even meeting Dance. Yes, even on your first playthrough. If that happens and he hands you the Righteous Authority, you will likely be extremely disappointed. This is especially true if you're playing this after Fallout 3 or New Vegas, where the unique weapons are actually unique. Or, at the very least, more powerful, and sometimes have their own individual appearances. After all, oh baby, has a far more weathered look than the other super sledges. This devaluation somehow gets worse when you realize that both the UP-77 and the Waza rifle have the same legendary effect. And in Fallout 4, the Waza rifle is not even an Institute rifle, it's a laser rifle, making it outright identical to the UP-77. With the sole exception of whatever leveled mods the UP-77 has on it when found. Also, considering you cannot obtain the Waza rifle without completing the main quest and saving St. Sean, and then doing a few unmarked quests for him, the only real reason to ever obtain that weapon is if you have gone full 100%er, if that's even possible in a game this size with this many redundancies. After all, it would mean collecting every legendary weapon variant. So how could you fix all of this? Well, my first thought is to fire Todd Howard out of a cannon into the sun. Sadly, that's not very realistic. So the simplest fix would be to simply remove legendary drops entirely, and replace them with one alternate variant of each base weapon that makes sense given the type. We certainly do not need a gamma gun that does extra damage to super mutants or feral ghouls. Why? Just why? After all, 0 plus 0 is still 0. And yes, I found this novel little piece of junk in my casual playthrough. At least a Mutant Slayer's radium rifle can still do some damage to them. As to replacements, let's run through a few that I think make sense. A pipe pistol or rifle that rarely, based on your luck stat, randomly fires several projectiles at once. You could call it cheaper by the dozen. A double-barreled shotgun that sets targets on fire, let's call this one Dragon's Breath. And yeah, that's just the incendiary effect, but it would be unique without the legendary system. And we have shotgun ammo that does that today, so no immersion break there. A laser pistol that blinds your targets for a time, let's call this the Eclipse. A sword that does more damage to opponents holding melee weapons or allows for easier blocking, call it the Duelist Special. As for the combat shotgun, yeah, let's keep the French one front and center. It's even behind an army of raiders, so you do kinda have to earn it. Those are just a few suggestions to make them interesting. Now, how should you gain these new uniques? Well, with cheaper by the dozen, it could simply be the quest reward for the Abernathy or maybe Finch quests. Dragon's Breath, I can see having to take something like that from an already lunatic raider boss, maybe one who's obsessed with fire. The Duelist Special you could find in a museum, preferably held by a raider who has taken over the museum and has gone full red coat cosplay. Think about it. You walk into a museum, look up to a balcony, and see a raider in colonial British garb, waving his sword about and monologuing about how he is the reincarnation of a long-dead British general, here to reclaim these lands for the Empire. I don't know why, but that just feels Fallout-ish to me. And now, if you didn't want to give each one a unique quest or wielder, you could add them as occasional one-time rewards for the Radiant system. And yes, I did nearly throw up in my mouth trying to say that. But if we're forced to live with that system, we might as well make completing those, chores somewhat fulfilling. Now, there is another way this could be fixed, but it's a lot lazier. You could simply make the actual named weapons stronger than their common legendary counterparts, even if only by a little. I can't imagine this would require more than slightly tweaking a few numbers. And it would give players an incentive to actually care about and seek out the, unique variants. On to the so-called uniques. Let's be honest, several of them could use a slight or even massive overhaul, especially since many are just standard legendaries. Obviously, I'm not including the true unique items in this. Those are proof someone at Bethesda still cares. Probably somebody Todd locked in Bethesda's basement and is trying to get people's attention through sheer mental whiplash by somehow injecting their good ideas into these games. Maybe the Todd we know now is a replicant of some kind, and the real him was locked in Bethesda's basement sometime in the middle of Fallout 4's development. It would explain most of 76. Now let's go over, say, 6 examples of quote-unquote unique weapons that could use a minor or major overhaul. UP-77 Limitless Potential. A laser pistol with the generic never-ending effect, meaning that while it still uses up ammo, it never needs to be reloaded. While kinda neat, it is a bit immersion-breaking, and frankly is one of the bigger head-scratchers when it comes to having actual common legendary laser rifles that do the exact same thing. It's a prototype that was sealed in a vault. This could've, probably should've, been something akin to a more efficient version of the OG recharger pistol, where it recharges over time but requires no ammo. Spray and pray. Good gravy, this one's ridiculous. While incredibly fun, it is frankly a good way to accidentally start a war or kill your own follower. So let's turn it into a more name-accurate weapon by dropping the explosions and having it have a much greater spread than even regular submachine guns. It would still be useful for clearing out weaker enemies in a decent-sized area, it just wouldn't be a win button anymore. I still love this damn thing, though. Justice, sold by Penny, has the staggering effect. The name alone means that doesn't really fit. Have it either stagger or deal more damage only to raiders and gunners. After all, where is the justice in staggering innocent people to death? The Last Minute. Another misnamed weapon. If it's going to be called that, have it do progressively more damage the lower your health, or a lot more damage when a companion drops to their injured state. Reba 2. Does 50% more damage to lurkies and bugs. Considering the quest to obtain it, why does it do more damage to bugs? Yeah, why not just have it outright ignore lurky shells, or have greater VATS accuracy against them? Last but not least is good intentions. First and foremost, considering his backstory, Clint should not have this weapon. The obvious wielder should be James Wire. After all, within the Commonwealth, he is the epitome of the phrase, "the road to hell is paved with good intentions," at least outside of the Institute. As for the effect, have it do more damage against former allies, if that's actually possible, or failing that, have it do more damage the further down certain quest lines you go. After all, the Brotherhood thinks they have good intentions, but they're definitely not on the road to heaven. So, all in all, it would be a fairly simple matter to fix this issue. I don't know if it would be easy, but it would definitely be simple. Sometimes when I'm playing Fallout 4 and find a legendary drop, I feel almost like I'm playing an MMORPG, only there's no one to trade the gear to if I don't need or want it. It's almost lonely. Let's face the simplest truth here, more isn't always better. It can often simply drown out what actual quality is there. There might be treasure buried in that desert, but it's not going to be easy to find. And we shouldn't have to put a AAA game under a microscope to find the better qualities. Well, at least it's better than the electron microscope we would need for Starfield. Thank goodness for Fallout 4's non-melee combat at least. While I have a few other random thoughts on the legendary system, none of them are what you could call coherent. Mostly just ridiculous ideas popping into my head and then fading into the void just as quickly. So, thank you for listening to my inane ramblings.